Apple's March 8th event is happening tomorrow morning, and I can't even begin to explain how excited I am because after Apple sent out their invites for the event, we continue to get bombshell leaks and rumors that completely changed our expectations for what we could be seeing at this event. So in this video, I'm gonna go through these leaks and explain my predictions for tomorrow's event, including which Macs I think are the most likely to get released. But before I get into all of that, I've got to discuss some new discoveries in terms of what Apple's peak performance invitation is actually supposed to mean, because in the video that I made last week, I mentioned that peak performance was supposed to signify Apple releasing a brand new Apple Silicon chip. And a lot of you guys slammed me for not realizing that they spelled peak with two E's, which means that it's more likely sneak peek. And don't worry, I noticed that from the beginning and I fully understand it. But my point was that peak performance is a common term to symbolize the best of the best performance, and that's what I think Apple is going after. And if you don't believe me, a bunch of people on Twitter posted their foreign Apple invites that confirm that Apple is actually talking about performance. For example, the Brazilian invitation literally means an unprecedented performance, or in other words, performance that has never been seen or done before. And then in Turkish, the invite says our performance is about to begin, which kind of symbolizes that Apple is just getting started in terms of performance, kind of like we haven't seen anything yet. Even though Apple's M1 Max is already powerful, it's nothing compared to the performance Apple is about to show us. And then finally, the German invite says our imagination of performance, or kind of like the performance that Apple has always imagined and strived for finally being here. So based on all those multinational invitations, I think it's safe to say that the event is more about high performance than the whole peak aspect of it. Now, before I get into what we could possibly see in terms of a new chip, let me first refresh you guys on what we should be expecting to see tomorrow. First off, we're gonna be getting a new iPhone SE 3, and according to sources like Ross Young and Ming-Chi Kuo, it's gonna have the same 4.7-inch display, the same home button, and the same overall design, except with the new A15 chip and 5G support. And we should also be expecting a new iPad Air 5 with the A15 chip, 5G, and potentially some features like quad stereo speakers, a new dual camera design, and a new purple color, according to Luke Miani. And on top of that, the iPhone 13 is supposed to get a new green color, as well as a bunch of new cases. But all of that right there isn't what this event is truly going to be about, because we're about to see a bunch of new Mac related products. So let's jump right into these leaks. First up, we've been expecting Apple's new high-end Mac Mini ever since late last year, when it was delayed because Apple wanted to give more attention to the new MacBook Pros. So I fully believe that we'll be seeing this new Mac Mini at tomorrow's event, packing the same M1 Pro and M1 Max chips that we already have in the new MacBook Pros. But other than that, Apple did actually register 2 more Mac devices with the EEC, which means that we could see these new Macs revealed at this event, and thankfully, we got some huge leaks over the weekend. First up, Dan Rue posted a tweet mentioning that he heard from a source that we could be getting a higher-end iMac at this event. But the weird thing is that Ming-Chi Kuo just tweeted his expectations for Mac releases this year, including a more powerful Mac Mini, which we were expecting, and a new 27-inch non-mini LED display this year, and then both the iMac Pro and Mac Pro next year. And the key point is that Ross Young was actually expecting the iMac Pro here in the next couple of months, as well as Dan Rui, who says an iMac could be coming tomorrow. So in my opinion, what we could actually be seeing is a new 27-inch high-end iMac that is not an iMac Pro, but a new iMac to fit the same M1 Pro and M1 Max chips as the new high-end Mac Mini will be getting. And the craziest thing of all is that over the weekend, Mark Gurman's Power On newsletter finally, for the first time, acknowledged the possibility of having two different 27-inch iMacs, which is something that I've been considering for months now. And he says we could be seeing a new iMac perhaps as soon as the first half of the year, while at the same time, he doesn't believe a new Mac Pro or iMac Pro is ready to go on sale imminently, matching up to what Ming-Chi Kuo said. So with all of that said, a new iMac is definitely a possibility for tomorrow. But on top of that, we got some major leaks this morning in terms of Apple releasing a new Studio 27-inch display tomorrow, and almost every source agrees with this. First of all, 9to5Mac shared some exclusive leaks late last week concerning this new display coming alongside a new Mac Studio, which I'm about to get into after this display. And then of course, Ming-Chi Kuo already mentioned it, and then Mark Gurman actually mentioned the same display, saying that Apple has completed work on it months ago and it could be ready to launch at any moment, even tomorrow. But then Luke Miani came out with some exclusive leaks this morning saying that he fully believes that this display is coming at tomorrow's event, and I think with everything that we've been seeing, this display is coming for sure, no doubt about it. And now before I get into the absolute most surprising reveal at tomorrow's event, including my theory on what it would actually be, let me first talk about the new expected M2 chip. For weeks now, we've been getting a lot of leaks concerning a new entry-level MacBook Pro coming at this event, starting with a DigiTimes report earlier this year, which at first didn't really make any sense until more and more leaks started to confirm this idea, especially the fact that one of the Macs Apple registered with the EEC was actually a laptop. And then this weekend, Mark Gurman took things to a whole new level by mentioning that Apple has been testing out multiple Macs with a new chip in recent weeks that includes an 8-core CPU and 10-core GPU, which are exactly the specs for the M2 chip according to Mark Gurman. And apparently, Apple has been testing this new chip on machines running macOS 12.3, 12.4, and the future macOS 13. So the idea is that if Apple was not planning on releasing these new M2 Macs until WWDC, then why would they be testing it with a version of macOS that's supposed to be getting released as soon as next week? And then going further, Mark believes that we'll be getting both M2 and M1 Pro / M1 Max model Macs, all coming in the first half of this year, including Mac Minis with both of those chips, iMacs with up to the M1 Max, and a new MacBook Pro with an M2 chip, all being spread out over the next couple of months up until June. So before I give you my take on which ones are coming when, let's jump right into the new Mac Studio. This new Mac showed up last week with an exclusive leak from 9to5Mac claiming that it would sit somewhere between the Mac Mini and the Mac Pro. And then Luke Miani came out this morning and claimed that the new Mac Studio would be revealed at tomorrow's event, no doubt about it, and I actually believe him. So let me explain why. First up, 9to5Mac says that Apple is working on two different versions of this new Mac Studio, with one of them getting up to an M1 Max chip, while the other will be getting an even more powerful chip, potentially the M1 Max Duo. And at first, this was really weird to me because I thought that the new high-end Mac Mini was supposed to get the M1 Pro and M1 Max chips. So it wouldn't really make sense for the Mac Studio to also start with the M1 Max, until I realized something that should have been obvious to me the entire time. What if this new Mac Studio is actually the replacement for the high-end Mac Mini? Because if you think about it, the redesigned Mac Mini renders that we were seeing from sources like Jon Prosser and Leaks Apple Pro came with a much slimmer design language. And the weirdest part of all is that the cooling system on those renders seemed to be inferior for being able to cool the M1 Max. So what if that new slim design is actually only meant for the new lower end M2 chip, which uses a lot less power? And that would mean that Apple would need a new, much larger Mac Mini design with sufficient cooling capabilities, exactly like Luke Miani's renders show us, with tons of vents on the bottom being perfect for the M1 Max or maybe even an M1 Max Duo. And the idea I have is that because this new design is much larger than the Mac Mini, Apple cannot call it a Mini anymore. And they also can't call it a Mac Mini Pro since it still has the name Mini in it. And therefore, they need a brand new title, the Mac Studio. And in my point of view, this would make it a lot easier for Apple to market this new Mac, because in the past, there used to be both a low-end and a high-end Mac Mini, so it could get confusing if you're trying to figure out if it's the weak version or the powerful version. But now, a Mac Studio will always be known as the high-end Pro version, and the Mac Mini will always be known as the lower-end consumer-friendly version. And since I believe the Mac Studio is quite literally the new high-end Mac Mini, I can basically guarantee that it is coming tomorrow. And with that said, if the new 27-inch Apple display is in fact called the Studio display, then it will also 100% get released alongside the Mac Studio because it just makes sense for marketing. But now we've got to figure out what else we could be seeing at this event, because we could be getting 2 more Macs according to the EEC filings. And in my opinion, there are 2 scenarios that could happen, so let's get into scenario number 1. There's a chance that Apple isn't ready to reveal the M2 chip just yet, and they could be waiting until WWDC. So in that case, I actually think that Apple could be releasing the new M1 Pro and M1 Max 27-inch iMac alongside the Mac Studio and the Studio display. However, these products kind of contradict each other because this iMac would essentially be the new Mac Studio and Studio display put together into one machine, so I'm not sure it makes sense to release both of those ideas or Macs together. So that brings us to scenario number 2. I was looking at Luke Miani's new Mac Studio renders, and I noticed that they look almost exactly like the redesigned Mac Mini renders from last year, complete with the plexiglass top, but in a taller design with the extra vents on the bottom. So what if Apple decides to reveal both of these new Mac Mini designs at the same time, and they can market them as the lower-end redesigned M2 Mac Mini with the small design and the higher-end M1 Max Studio? And then that would give them the chance to properly explain the differences between both chips so that people don't get confused on why the M2 is slower. And maybe there's even a chance that this new Mac Studio could come with a brand new M1 Max Duo chip that we've been talking about for a couple of months, or maybe even the new 12-core chip that Dylan DKT leaked before he left Twitter. And this would actually make sense considering the huge design of the Mac Studio compared to the smaller Mac Mini. And then of course, on top of that, we would also be getting the entry-level M2 MacBook Pro, which has been rumored for months now, and this would actually match up to all 3 of the Macs that Apple registered with the EEC. And then a couple of months later, Apple could release the high-end iMac, and then in the fall, release the rest of the M2 Mac lineup, including the MacBook Air and the 24-inch iMac. However, the only problem with this second scenario is that Luke Miani said that he had exclusive info that pointed to no MacBook coming at all at this event, so I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens at tomorrow's event. But with that said, go ahead and give me your thoughts on what you think is gonna be coming tomorrow, and if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click the circle above to subscribe so you don't miss out on our coverage of this event and all the new products, and definitely check out one of those 2 videos right over there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.